It's now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com network.
And we're coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show is being brought to us in part by the Title Bout Championship computer game. If you're looking for a simulation game that's the best on the market, check out Title Bout. You can visit our website, BillyCBoxing.com, and click on the Title Bout banner. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by the Southern Gourmet Spice Company. Get yourself some Kenny Bears, www.southerngourmetspice.com. Just tell them Billy C sent you. And, of course, today's show is being brought to you in part by my book, Tom Molino, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold, and you can get yourself a copy of this book right now while you're watching or listening to this very show. Just visit BarnesandNoble.com or, of course, Amazon.com. If you're looking to get a signed copy, don't worry about it. Just drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing. That's TalkinBoxing.com. Okay, we just got done watching Terence Crawford stop Shawn Porter in his title fight. Terence Crawford wins officially by 10th round stoppage, 1 minute and 21 seconds of the 10th round. Shawn's pops stops the fight after being dropped twice by Porter. Porter was dropped twice by Crawford. All right. I love the fight. It just, I'm a big Shawn Porter fan. I always have been. I love the way this kid constantly comes forward, and you're always going to get his all. But he's such a hard guy to fight. I mean, he's so unorthodox and crazy, coming at you wild. I mean, he's reminiscent of a caveman coming at you. Terence Crawford, I think, proved tonight, even though Bud came out. I just think he's a better boxer. I think he proved that he can stop a charging bull. His hand speed, his accuracy. I thought he had a great performance. I had the fight close. I had it even, going back and forth. To be honest with you, at the time of the stoppage, I had Crawford winning rounds 3, 4, 6, 8, and 9, and Porter rounds 1, 2, 5, and 7. I thought round 8 was a great round. I made a note to myself after the 9th round. I said, I think Crawford seems to be taking over this fight. And then ultimately in round 10, Porter goes down not once but twice. Listening to the commentators, going back and forth with the rounds, they were all close. And you could have scored the rounds really either way. I mean, there was only a couple of dominating rounds by Crawford. Like I said, I gave the first 2 rounds to Shawn Porter. I know some of the guys that were scoring the fight on the broadcast anyway, and around the world here, gave round 2 to Crawford. I made a note that it was close, but I gave rounds 3 and 4 to Terence Crawford, back to Porter in rounds 5, and then 6 I gave to Crawford, back to Porter in round 7, and then 8, 9, and of course 10, all in favor of Terence Crawford. I think he proved that he's I think he's the best welterweight out there, no doubt about it. Joining me right now is Alex Papali. What's up, Alex? I can't hear you. I have no sound, Alex. Oh, wait.
Hey, Billy C. How you doing?
Hey, now we can hear you. So what'd you think of the fight?
I loved it. I thought it was a really good fight. I had Crawford behind actually going into that round, and I was just tweeting. He's got to win on my card. He has to win all these rounds and probably put him down. And before I had even finished that sentence, he put him down.
You had Crawford behind going into the 10th?
Yeah, I do agree with you, though. Some of the rounds that you had Crawford winning, I did agree that they were close, and I thought they could kind of go either way, although I thought they went Porter's way. You know me, I like a busier guy, and I thought that a lot of the rounds, it was Porter that was busier. However, there's no doubt about it. It did seem that Crawford was he was going to turn it on. He was holding back a little. He was waiting to shift into a later gear, and when he did, he did.
He may have been the busy fighter and pushing forward, but he wasn't landing as many shots. Dax is with us now. Dax, what was your thoughts on the fight?
Pretty much, and matter of fact, I think I commented back to Alex about a similar about that tweet that he was just speaking about. And I made several other tweets where this is where Porter becomes his own worst enemy. Porter needs to stop throwing the looping hooks, and he needs to throw a few straight punches in between there, because he was landing those right hooks quite a bit. But just like with the Keith Thurman fight, just like with the Errol Spence fight, and just like with even Adrian Broner, he gets overzealous. He gets too much into it, and he goes too wide with those punches, and he gets caught in between them. This in those other two fights, he wasn't hurt. They were flash knockdowns. I'm not really sure how hurt he was in this fight. Obviously we weren't there to see that. But somebody like Terence Crawford, who's a sharpshooter, is going to take advantage of that. But I had Shawn Porter winning that fight. And if Shawn Porter would have been a little bit more, if he had a little bit more controlled aggression, if he would have pushed the pace a little more, through a few more straight punches and hooks, I do believe he would have beat Terence Crawford. And I will say this, I'll get it out of the way now. Terence Crawford did not look like the pound-for-pound #1 fighter in the world. I would say, and I bet money right now, that Jerome Boots Ennis would have knocked Terence Crawford out tonight.
I don't know. What was the score? What was the score? I'm curious to know. You both had Porter up. I had it close going into that 10th round. I had it 86-85 Crawford. I mean, I thought it was close, but what kind of numbers did you have, Alex? What was your score going into that 10th?
I had it 6-3 for
Wow. Wow. Dax, how about you?
2 of those rounds were very close and could have gone the other way.
Wow.
But
I had it 87-84 in favor of Porter.
Wow. See, I guess those closer rounds, you guys scored more. Nobody's a bigger Shawn Porter fan than me, but a lot of those punches that he was throwing, and granted, he was throwing them, but they weren't landing flush. And I think that those chest body shots that Crawford was showing, I was scoring for those. Those were landing flush, and they were stopping Porter in his tracks. And to be honest with you, that's why I think that fight was stopped. You say, you didn't know if he was that hurt. I do think he was hurt. I think his legs were not with him. That's why he was pounding the canvas, and his pop saw that. I don't know. I think that they made a good point, although the commentating wasn't all that great. But I did think they made a good point when they said that they thought the father stopped the fight because he knew what was about to come. Thoughts on that?
I agree. That's what he didn't want his son to go out there diminished against one of the best fighters on earth. I disagree with Dax. I think that to me, this fight reminded me very much of Canelo Kovalev in that even though the favored fighter was losing rounds, it seemed like, if he turned it up, I think he might be able to get this guy. And eventually he did, and, he took him out. Now, not to say that he could have done it earlier, I think he did have to figure him out. And but no, to me, I think he showed a lot of things that do make him one of the best fighters on earth. I don't know. To me, I like that Canelo's busier. I like that what Usyk did. But so the inactivity works against Crawford. But what I saw tonight, I loved. I love those check hooks. He gives you the check hook from either side, from the southpaw with a right hook or from orthodox with the left hook. So fast, so accurate. And all his punches are, I mean, Bill, it's reminiscent of that Bad Intentions. There's so much snap in his punches, even though it's, Porter was the one, wearing the Hagler-esque robe. Crawford's the guy that reminds me more of Hagler.
I thought he did remind me a little bit of Hearns, but Dax, what'd you think about that?
With the father stopping the fight?
Yeah. What, did you think he was hurt? Did you think it was justified? I mean, what was your thoughts?
And again, as I was saying, I wasn't there. We criticize referees a lot of times for stopping fights. You can be, Bill and Alex, you guys know, we could be sitting 5 feet from the ring and you can't really see into the eyes. So we really don't know how hurt Porter was. And his father would know better than anybody, even better than the referee. So Porter may have really been that hurt, and his father just didn't want to see him end up going out completely knocked out or take any further punishment because, Shawn isn't going to quit. Now, back to my other statement is that even at 140 pounds, as good as Crawford is, he has always been a slow starter. He was a slow starter at 135 pounds until he gets into the third, fourth round. These new younger guys that are coming up are the 2.0 versions. Josh Taylor was there tonight. Look at how Josh Taylor performs from the opening bell. And Josh Taylor isn't reckless. Josh Taylor doesn't throw wide punches. Josh Taylor has an iron chin. Again, a Jaron Ennis who starts so fast. He has such great reflexes. He has Pernell Whitaker type reflexes. I've seen him up close in gyms. We've seen him on TV. A Virgil Ortiz Jr. who starts fast. And these guys, they haven't quite reached their prime, but Terence Crawford, he is 1 or 2 fights away from these guys being 1 or 2 fights away towards their prime. And these guys, you're not going to be able to start slow with them.
Yeah, but you know what? Listen.
And they hit hard. They're big welterweights. It's just not going to happen. And that takes nothing away from his skill set. It's just I don't see it happening.
We've been talking about Terence Crawford, the boxing world, for years now. He's 34 years old. He's 38-0 now with 29 knockouts. I think it's pretty obvious that these guys are avoiding him. They put the camera on Errol Spence. He gets up shaking his head after the knockout and walks away. Like what? Shaking his head like, oh, that wasn't a legit knockdown? It wasn't a legit knockout? I don't know. I think it's pretty obvious that the welterweight division is avoiding Terence Crawford. How much more does the guy have in him at 34 years old in this division? You're right. The young fighters coming up are the young guns. But, the existing crop should at least fight him. What's your guys' thoughts?
Well, I think that'd be a great fight if he fights Jaron Ennis. If the Spence fight.
No, I'm talking about the bigger fights, like with
Spence.
Well, yeah, you even mentioned Thurman, but Thurman, is he even in the discussion anymore? He hasn't fought in 2 years.
No. To me, like Dax was saying, I think it's Ennis, it's Virgil Ortiz, it's Yordenis Ugas. Those are the kind of guys we're talking about. And Errol Spence, yeah, of course, is the fight you want to see. That's what I'd like to see because number 1 and 2, no matter how you slice it, and I think I agree with you that I would have Crawford over Spence at this point. If those two guys fight, I think you get an undisputed champion. I think that's the way. Of course, we should want to see in this division.
Porter. You can make the argument that Porter beat Spence. That late, what was it, the 11th round, that knockdown. Probably, definitely iced it for Spence. So I mean, yeah, I would lean towards Crawford as well, and maybe a Josh Taylor, Dax. Maybe a Josh Taylor fight does make sense.
In terms of the top welterweight, it's not that I'm putting Terence Crawford down, but even at 140 pounds, there was a lot of problems with his promoter. If I was Terence Crawford years ago, I would have got rid of Bob Arum. And I would have went to...
Me too. How long have I said it? Dax, come on. I've been saying it for years that Bob Arum is the guy who has kept Crawford down. I mean, it's fact.
But not just Bob Arum keeping him down, but then you have the PBC who doesn't want any of their fighters to lose their coveted O. So then what they'll do is it's okay to lose an O to a fellow PBC fighter. So this way we can just use that to market the other PBC fighter with their O more instead of actually putting him against the best. And unfortunately what happens is it's wasting the prime years of fighters like Terence Crawford, fighters, and I said this about AJ with the Wilder fight. You need to be more assertive with your promoter and demand that you want these fights. Somebody like an Errol Spence who has 2 belts. You know what? Yeah, you can call the shots. It comes to that point where you can call the shots, but they choose not to, and it's not. It's unfortunate to Terence Crawford. I'm not saying that Terence Crawford's ducking anybody. I'm not saying that Terence Crawford can't beat Errol Spence or any of those other guys. What I'm saying is just that right now, as you stated, Terence Crawford is in his mid-30s. There's only a few years left of his prime. These other young guns are in their early 20s, and they're beasts. And what's going to happen pretty much is just like what happened with Triple G, where all of a sudden, Triple G is 36. He's starting to slow down. He's not cutting off the ring as well. You can see his punches coming a little bit more. Now everybody wants to fight with Triple G.
Hey, I want to give a shout out to user Amok, who just said, I think once Booth, he's agreeing with you, Dax, evolves his style and works out, he thinks that he might be the guy that beats Crawford. Time will tell. Everybody runs, nobody beats Father Time. I just honestly think that between the promoter and the rest of the division, Crawford, hasn't really been dealt great opportunities. He's obviously making the best of them. Who could beat him at the top of that division, Alex? Who could beat Terence Crawford?
Well, I think the only one that I think has a shot is Errol Spence. I think the other ones that will make for interesting fights are guys we've discussed. I think Dax has a point. Youth is certainly on the size of physical size, as well as youth are on the side of Jaron Ennis. However, but I just think he's way too green for a guy like Terence Crawford. So I think, Crawford, I think at this point would mop the floor with him. So I do think that I think physically, I don't know. To me, a welterweight, yeah, he's 5'10". That's big, but I don't think that would be that much of a problem for Terence Crawford. I do think that Errol Spence is certainly the skill and the is the pedigree of the division. I think those are the 2 guys. That's what we want to see. I think this is the same situation that we got into with Joshua Fury. So hopefully we can have it happen. We've been waiting for it for a while. If it doesn't happen, I think, like Dax said, one fight that could be interesting, I wouldn't be surprised if we get that, is Josh Taylor moving up. I think he'd have a big disadvantage. He's a tall guy, but no, I would favor Crawford in that matchup too.
Well, Dax, when you look at the rest of the division, I think a logical and maybe not so, I shouldn't use the word logical, but what's most likely because of the way the business of boxing works, maybe a fight with Ugas gets him another belt should he win. I'm talking about Terence Crawford to set up an Errol Spence fight.
One, there'll be no Ugas fight because Ugas is a PBC fighter.
No, but
So
I mean,
no, hold on.
so is Porter. So is Porter, though.
Exactly. So why are we going to fight Terence Crawford when we can just fight Errol Spence, and then one of those guys will be a 3 belt holder? And what we're going to do is we're going to shut out Terence Crawford. When I speak about the upcoming guys, whether or not it's Virgil Ortiz, whether or not it's Jaron Ennis, I'm speaking in the reality of the boxing world. We're talking here, guys, even the elite guys fight once a year, maybe twice. Canelo this last year and a half has been, a totally different animal than what we're used to. But, so you got to figure this is 2022. It'll be 2022 in just a little over a month. By the time Terence Crawford has 3 more fights with Top Rank, it's going to be 2025.
Yeah, but the thing is, and Alex, I just when I look at Terence Crawford's talent, he's clearly has the talent. And okay, if you want to isolate and look at Errol Spence, who's also talent loaded, I just think that, and Errol Spence is bigger. He's a bigger fighter. I just think that really, I do agree with Dax is alluding to, that these promoters don't make the fights, but the Errol Spence fight is the fight that makes the most sense for that division. I mean, and then you open up the door for some of the young fighters. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, but like you said, I mean, I think we don't always get what we want and what makes the most sense. I mean, look what happened with Canelo just this week.
We'll talk about that. Hold on. We'll talk about that a little later.
Right. So, I mean, when you think about that, you never know what, the thing about this sport is that it is a balance of risk versus reward. And, Errol Spence represents a lot of risk as well as the reward of saying, hey, I unified the welterweight division. So hopefully they both want to do that.
Well, at the end of the day, I thought Terence Crawford's accuracy, hand speed, it prevailed. One thing I was impressed with, and I think if I learned one thing out of this fight about Terence Crawford, more than I didn't really realize prior to this fight, he could take a shot, because Shawn Porter did land a couple of flush punches, Dax.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Shawn Porter's never been known as a big puncher. He's more of a volume puncher. But in terms of the division, to clear it out, there's just certain promoters that are causing this problem in boxing. The 168-pound division unified. We've had the several World Boxing Super Series to get a boss of a division. The heavyweight division is pretty much one fight away from getting a boss. The way we would be able to clear up the welterweight division would be, and how it used to be, is where these young prospects like a Virgil Ortiz, Jaron Ennis, Conor Benn, Alexis Rocha, they start fighting these guys like a Danny Garcia, Cavalucas, the Mean Machine, Jamal James, these guys who aren't quite in their prime but not quite past it, and they go and they defeat them. And then so this way, that would actually force a Terence Crawford and a Errol Spence to fight each other, because they wouldn't make any money, as much money, I should say, fighting these young upcoming guys. And by that time, they would be ready to wind down their career. As far as Errol Spence goes, if he comes back and he actually fights at that top level, I'll eat my hat. I don't think Errol Spence is coming back and he will fight at that top level. There's been injuries that weren't disclosed, such as the hematoma to the eye, which turned out to be a torn retina. He had some facial damage that there are rumors that was not quite fully quite fully disclosed. I shouldn't say not exposed. We do know he had those dental implants. We have seen Errol Spence more or less go through the motions in a lot of his fights outside of the Shawn Porter fight, like with the Mikey Garcia fight, just like with the Danny Garcia fight. And then now with the accident and with the way he is in terms of medical clearance, I don't expect to see Errol Spence back into the ring, at least 13 to 14 months, if he's back into the ring at all. And if he comes back, he's not going to be on that high level. So Terence Crawford needs to get away from Top Rank, or he needs to fight one of these guys like a Josh Taylor or somebody else from the 140-pound division moving up like a Regis Prograis, or even, you know what, dare to be great himself and move up to 154 pounds.
But the truth is somebody has to step in the ring with him. I mean, he's the guy that I think people should be reaching out to him. At least that's what I think. But on the undercard,
but that's not how it works in boxing.
No, I know how it works. Unfortunately, I know too well how it works, and it's a shame. And that's what's the whole problem with our sport. But I
just wanted to mention that. If you think about it, though, both these guys, Spence has not fought since December of 2020. This was the first time Crawford's fought since November of 2020. So much of the pound for pound and who's the best of the division, boxing itself has to do with what have you done for me lately. Right now, Terence Crawford is a massive chip in that he just did something pretty stupendous. He stopped Shawn Porter. Even though maybe, it would have been nice to see one more knockdown. I can't help but feel a little sadistic to say that the guy's father came over and had to stop it, So to me, that was enough.
It was his trainer. It was his trainer. It wasn't like in the previous fight.
It felt like it was in the neighborhood. It was like the father came out from the lawn. It was like,
nobody wants to take a risk anymore. They get a cut. The other guy couldn't continue. But I mean,
hold on a second. I did want to say, and I got to say, as an old guy, I really enjoyed this. I don't really care for all the entrance stuff, but these two guys, I enjoyed their entrances. And how could I not? One guy conjuring imagery of Marvelous Marvin Hagler. The other guy's coming in to a 1987 LL Cool J song. And it was the year he was born, but I was in high school.
No, listen, it was a great... It was a great, thing that Porter did for about Hagler, but this was he was no Marvin Hagler in this fight. But
no, I think Crawford was the one who was a lot more Hagler-esque, and I really enjoyed it. I thought that, to me, if I do, like
Hagler never fought like that. Hagler came right at you. He didn't fight the way.
No, I know, but what I was going to say was that even though I did have it 6-3 in favor of Porter going into that last round, like I mentioned, I thought 2 rounds were close. And if I flip those, it ends up 5-4 for Crawford. So it was a pretty close fight.
Yeah, there's no question. Another undercard that was less than stellar. But the one fight I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that middledweight.
It's pretty
Ali Canula, I guess is how you pronounce his win over Nadam.
Alim Hanallah.
Yeah, that guy, which I'll never be able to say his name. He showed promise, but again, they were kind of comparing him to Triple G, but he doesn't have that one punch knockout power. I thought Buddy McGirt gave him the great advice, when he said when he was fooling around during that fight. Buddy said, "Well, just stop him," and then it took him all that time to stop him. What'd you guys think of that fight and him?
Well, to make it easy on myself, I'm going to call him Zanabek. He's a former Olympian. He now has back-to-back wins over two former belt holders, Rob Brandt and Hassan Endam. Both have one thing in common, which is losing to Murata, who's facing Triple G next in the unification bout. What I like about him is the way they brought him along. Even though Nadam is 37 years old and no doubt at the tail end of his career, he is and always has been an awkward fighter. No matter how many times he's been knocked down, I think Quillen knocked him down 6 times, Lemieux 5 times, so on and so forth. So Zanabek, you have to give him credit for maintaining his composure. He stuck with his game plan, and he went out and just did what he had to do. And so far, he has slowly. They haven't been rushing him. They haven't been overhyping him. They have been building him properly, and I think that the next step for him would be somebody like a Luis Arias or a Liam Williams, who would kind of test his chin and kind of see if he can stay composed in a little bit of a firefight. And then I think in another 6 or 7 fights that he's definitely going to be ready for a championship bout.
Yeah, well, we're running out of options there. I'm sorry, Alex. What was your thoughts on the headbutt fight with Falco and Volney?
Oh, I thought that headbutt was rough. It wasn't the worst headbutt I've ever seen, but it certainly, his reaction, it certainly seemed like it must have been incredibly painful, because you don't usually see somebody cry out.
Yeah, but what about the sound when they played it back?
Oh, yeah. It
sounded like two ram's heads,
Yeah, two coconuts.
Yeah.
It was bad. And I did think that I did want to mention that I thought in terms of the Alim Hanallah fight.
You just wanted to say his name.
We got to, because I think Dax is right. I think that we will get used. He'll be around for a while. I think that one of the things that was really interesting was that Buddy McGirt and his team straight up died. It sure seemed like he broke his hand or hurt his hand. So
he did, but he never. But he didn't favor it after that. I didn't notice him.
I didn't notice him favoring it either, but it definitely seemed like he was signaling to his corner, "My hand hurts."
What did you think, Dax?
I believe that his hand, I don't believe it's broken. I do believe that he might have landed a punch and just caught a tendon, which a lot of times happens at the gym all the time. When somebody lands a punch, if their hands aren't wrapped tight enough, or if they happen to bend their wrist a little bit too much, they'll just stress a tendon, which will actually kind of put like a little shockwave up the arm, and it takes a few minutes before you're able to get full feeling back to your hand. Is what I think happened. I don't think
maybe he was just pointing to his hand, saying, "I wanted to land the left. That's what I want, the left. I wanted to land the left."
Maybe
whatever.
He was saying, "Hey, buddy, after this fight, can you sign it right here?"
Yeah. Can you sign my glove? Can you sign my glove for me? Oh man.
But I think speaking of all those, that look of what's his face, Volney, the guy that Iskina fought there.
He didn't look mean. He looked like he was a little.
Mean was great. I like that. I like that stare he was giving him.
Didn't work.
No,
it
wasn't enough. Work. Well, and that was the thing, is that I think that was the best part of the main event, was that, and I think Max, was saying he did. Max came out and said 7-1 my ass, because Porter was looking good, but I'm not sure we did see anything all that competitive in the undercard.
No, and unfortunately for Terence Crawford and Shawn Porter both, is that Terence Crawford, due to poor promotion, even though he's signed with one of the most legendary promotion companies in the history of the business, has never gotten a fight with the type of payday that he should have. And the problem with Shawn Porter is the fact that, win or lose, he actually has the toughest resume of anybody in the welterweight division, hands down.
There's no question that Shawn Porter, he's fought them all.
Julio Diaz, Devin Alexander, Paulie Malignaggi, Kell Brook, Adrian Broner, Keith Thurman, Andre Berto, Garcia, Spence, Ugas, and tonight Terence
Crawford.
Crawford, but yet he's never gotten that payday that even a Ryan Garcia has gotten, which is one of the things that frustrates me about the sport. That you get a guy who is willing to fight everybody, who doesn't care if he wins or loses, as long as he gives it his all, and he's out there and not getting rewarded for it like he's supposed to be.
Well, the truth of the matter is he's to me, he's genuinely happy. His whole crew, his family, his team, they all seem happy. So, at the end of the day, whether he could be making more or not, I think he's happy where he is. I think that, he wants more fights, of course, but the window's closing a little bit on him. My final thoughts on the fight is that Terence Crawford.
It would just be a little nice if some of these fighters got paid a little bit more like actors in Hollywood, where they were rewarded for their entertainment value more than their social media popularity.
Let's be real. These fights are not that entertaining. I don't even want to get into that, all right? I mean, we're jumping for joy. We're saying this was a great fight, but it really wasn't all that entertaining.
I wouldn't say it was a great fight, but it definitely had some.
It should have been a great fight. It should have been a great fight, to be honest with you. It should have been similar to I hate to say it, Hagler Hearns. Yeah, it was entertaining. Crawford won the fight. His skill set was on display. Shawn Porter, his being in shape was on display. His game plan was on display. And it's what we got. It was a fight we were looking forward to. It's just the way boxing is today.
It's a different era.
It is, and it's a shame. It's a shame because I wish these guys climbed the ladder the way they used to. And, you would end up at the end of the day, when you got to these title fights, you would always end up with two top guys. We got two top guys tonight in a sense. But Terence Crawford should have, I agree with Dax. He should have had bigger fights along the way, and hopefully he made out pretty well.
Well, and I think, Bill, what you're talking about, like if this fight was 20 years ago or even 15 years ago, 10 years ago, they were in the crowd, Winky and Vargas. If it was in Vargas's era, it would have become a fight where it became something more than a sporting event. And this never did. And I think that when that happens, it still does happen in this sport. It just doesn't always happen in the upper echelon. The stars of the sport tend to hold back a little. That's why Wilder Fury was so savagely beautiful, is that they decided we're going to friggin' hurt each other. And you don't usually see that at that level. We didn't see that tonight.
I think they were trying.
It never was a Chavez, Melder Taylor, or a Hearns Leonard.
No, but they were trying. They were trying to.
Moments. It did have moments of that.
They were trying to hurt each other, but the problem was this: Shawn Porter is inaccurate. He's wild. He fights like a caveman. His punches come from all angles, and occasionally he lands one. Terence Crawford, he's more of an accurate sharpshooter kind of a guy. Yes, his mean streak came out, and I think the size difference, because I mean, Shawn Porter looked like he was twice the size, mass wise, but anyway, I think Terence Crawford, I would love to see him fight Errol Spence, but we'll see who they give him next. But I wanted to talk about a couple other things before we go. Canelo Alvarez, Alex pointed me in this direction, and it was approved earlier this week, Tuesday specifically, that Alvarez is going to get a shot at the cruiserweight title, Makabu's WBC title, skipping over what I think is some other big fights for him in the light heavyweight division. First, Dax, what's your thoughts with him jumping right into cruiserweight and fighting Makabu? I know that the WBC is instrumental with this because he's their guy, but what's your thoughts on the fight itself?
Makabu is he's not a bomb. He's certainly got more in his tank than Kovalev did when Canelo fought Kovalev. But I have a feeling that we're not going to see Canelo around too much longer. He's made a ton of money. I think right now Canelo is going for the legacy, and I think he'd like to retire by the time he's in his mid-30s and enjoy his life with his life with his wife. I do believe that he has two children, if I'm correct. And after this, what is there really for him to accomplish? And why sit around and wait for this guy and that guy, whether or not it's the light heavyweight division, whether or not it is the super middleweight division, to decide to come back? Why wait for Demetrius Andrade, who keeps fighting guys that are at the C level, to bust into your press conference and you're just going to give them a fight because they're pulling a Shannon Briggs type stunt? He has nothing to prove, and this is more or less just to say that that would make him a 5 division champion, and the cruiserweights nowadays are as big as the heavyweights were when Roy Jones won his title at heavyweight. So I'm not going to bash him on it. It would have been certainly more impressive if he would have somehow managed to get himself a fight with Breedis, or if it was just a couple years ago and he went and called out Alexander Usyk. But, it is what it is. I'm not going to down him, and jumping up that much weight is dangerous. I don't care what anybody has to say about it.
Alex, I know you had some strong thoughts on that, but I will say this. He did already win a light heavyweight belt, theoretically, so moving up to cruiserweight is just another title for him. So what's your thoughts now? Have you calmed down a little bit, or what?
Well, I think that first of all, to me, it's so interesting the way it happened. It's like, ask and you shall receive. All you have to do is go to the convention, and boom! And I couldn't believe how quickly they made the pre-fight press conference and everything. They already had their first face-off. Yeah, I think it's a title grab. Yes, I agree with Dax. It is, somewhat difficult, possibly, to move up if he moves back down. Because we saw, of course, that was the doom of Roy Jones Jr. But who knows if he'll do that? Maybe Dax is right. Maybe he'll have 1-2 fights at cruiserweight or another catchweight fight, and that's it. Walk away.
Well, if he fights cruiserweight, then hey, Dax, will he go after Usyk?
If he went after Usyk and he defeated Usyk,
that'd be huge.
What could you say? How could anybody say anything about him, then?
I would close all my social media accounts. I would never come on to a podcast. I'd never come on to YouTube. I'd never even show my face. I would change my name. I'd pretend I hate boxing and my favorite sport is
crochet,
because everybody would have some sort of excuse on what happened, on how he defeated Usyk. They would have some sort of excuse. There would be a glove excuse. There would be that he was eating cows that were actually producing PEDs right out of their udders. There would always be something. It would just be, he would never get any credit. So, I mean, as great as it would be, that's exactly what the result would be from the fans. The fans today drive you nuts when it comes to accomplishments. There's no such thing as being able to accomplish enough in this era. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're right, but we're forgetting one important thing. We got the Bridgerweight division too. Maybe he goes and owns that one, Alex.
Well, I think that's what I wouldn't be surprised if, and that's what's disappointing because. What was it? 2 weeks ago, I was so excited at the idea of him going up to oh boy, what a slip of the tongue, up to light heavyweight and fighting Beterbiev or Bivol. I think Bivol is the most interesting match.
That's the fight.
That's the guy who has the most wrinkles that could possibly give him both he has the athleticism at that weight class and the size, and I think the savvy to give him a good fight. I think Beterbiev is the fight that's the money fight. That's the psycho fight that got to put your head in the crocodile's mouth fight.
Yeah, but that's also
I think for him, he beats Beterbiev pretty easy.
But see, wait a minute. See, I think that's the most risky fight.
Oh yeah, because when he gets hit, you're gonna get hit in the head, and
so that's why we're not seeing it.
Scary power. But
that's why we won't see it.
I think Canelo's so much better than him that I think he beat Beterbiev. And you're right. I think that's what's sad about it is that he's bypassing those two much more interesting fights to just grab a title against a guy that he should beat pretty easy. I mean, Makabu, if you look at his record, yeah, he beat Tabisu Machuno, but he beat a 2015 Tabisu Machuno. He stopped him. Then in his next fight, he got stopped in 3 rounds by Tony Bellew. So, no.
Bellew was on a roll at that point in time, though.
Well, I still like the. I think that the Bivol fight would be good and to lead to a Beterbiev, but
I think Bivol is one. He's MIA, and 2, Bivol, in my opinion, he's not a one-punch knockout artist, but he has more power than the average guy, and he has so many angles, and he takes a great punch. Anybody who can take that punch that Bivol took from Joe Smith Jr. and come out and win the rest of that fight definitely can take a punch from Canelo. Now, remember, Canelo and their team offered Beterbiev's team several times an opportunity for that fight, and they got no answer, so he moved on. Yeah, everybody else, like Demetrius Andrade, who fights every 3rd year, he's the only guy I know that Gary Russell wants somebody to explain to him how he's allowed to keep his title with the schedule that he defends it.
Well, he was a guy
that wants the Canelo fight. Right now it's the Canelo lottery, and nobody's willing to earn that position. They're demanding that position. So why shouldn't Canelo go out and make legacy for himself and retire early?
Well, he's following the path. He's following the path of least resistance, and I guess we just gotta. He's going for pound legacy, and it is what it is. One last thing, guys.
But if least resistance, has he really in the last few years had?
No. By on paper though, Dax, it looks great. But when listen, you go to cruiserweight division. Wouldn't you, if you wanted to be the best, wouldn't you take, like a Breedis?
No, I said that. No, I said that early on.
Or like a young, even Oakley. He's a young guy. I don't know, or even a guy that's not a champ, which makes no sense. But
But the last few years, I mean, you got to figure he fought Triple G twice. He fought Danny Jacobs. He fought
I know. Listen, pound for pound number 1. Pound for pound number 1 for sure. So listen, I got this email from Patty, and she says, "Hey Billy C, I love the show. Wish it was on every week, though I completely understand why you guys don't. I had an idea. Don't know if it will sound fun for you guys, but I like it." She says, "What about doing a show who has the best jab and why? What goes into the perfect jab, uppercut combos, etc." She says, "I feel I moved from a novice after 2 years to a beginner at this stage, wondering what goes into these skills, etc., etc." It got me thinking. Thanks for the email, Patty. It got me thinking about the jab, and I say to myself, are we talking about the greatest jab in history? Are we talking about who's got the best jab today? What's your guys' thoughts? Dax, I'll start with you.
In terms of who has the greatest jab in history?
Either way. Like when you think of a jab, what fighter comes to mind?
When I think of a jab, a lot of people will say, well, Larry Holmes. When I think of pretty much the perfect jab, I think of a prime Tommy Hearns, when he would use that jab and he would stick it out there in rapid 2s and 3s, if you got by that jab, that's when he shot that right hand, and that's when you went to sleep. We've seen him do it with so many fighters, good fighters, not average fighters either. Also, guys like Jerry Cooney, who is very underrated because of his loss. He wasn't a great fighter, let's put it that way. He was, he was very tough, but Jerry Cooney had one of the best jabs too. The way he would throw that straight out there, and he would always make sure that his shoulder was hiding his chin. So there's a lot of guys out. Lennox Lewis, Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko, he got maximum extension on his jab, and his jabs were like a lot of guys' power punches. So there's quite a few guys that you can say for like the greatest jab out there. I really can't pick just one.
What about you, Alex? What do you think?
I think the first one that comes to mind, of course, is Larry Holmes, because his was amazing, and not only was it because jab has many purposes. There's at least 6 different kinds of jabs, maybe. You get the up jab, double jab. So yeah, I do think that Larry's, of course, he could hurt you with it. Sonny Liston had another great one that was a power punch.
That's who I think. I think when I think of jab, I think Sonny Liston had the best. But Dax he brought up 2 names that you have to mention: Tommy Hearns and Klitschko. Klitschko. How many times did Klitschko fight and never throw a punch other than a jab? I mean, so yeah,
right.
No.
That was not one of my favorites because it was kind of pawing. I like whose jab I always liked was Prime Edwin Rosario. I like short, snappy jabs. But I do think right now, one we saw recently in action was Tyson Fury, and it's monstrous. The range of it is freakish.
Not to raise Billy's blood pressure, because this
don't even say it. I'm going to mute you.
In our first conversation, Lennox Lewis had one of the best jabs.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say somebody else. I'll give you Lennox Lewis.
Lennox Lewis had one of the best power jabs that was followed up with a right hand. I mean, when you would look at what he did to guys like just a Michael Grant, or how he would drive back somebody like Shannon Briggs, or even just so many guys that he was really the first heavyweight of the modern era to use that really stiff power jab continuously to set up that right hand.
I suggest you go and look at some both you guys go look at some Sonny Liston footage. He had a snapping jab. It was a hurtful jab that set up his power punch, but. I still, there's so many good fighters. The thing is a jab. When you think of good fighters, let me rephrase that. When you think of great fighters, most of them all had to have had a good jab, and that's the facts. Final thoughts on Terence Crawford, Dax.
There's no denying his skills. The only thing, as I've stated multiple times during the show, is that Terence Crawford needs to get nothing but big fights from here on out, because he is reaching his mid-30s. His prime is going to, not because he has bad habits, not because he doesn't train hard. It's just, as you stated yourself, Father Time is undefeated, and there's a lot of guys coming up, and I can see something going on with, and I hate to say it, but the PBC or one of those guys, one of those type promotion companies will wait till they see Terence Crawford all of a sudden slipping, then the fight that Terence has wanted to make for the longest time, or even his own promoter, Bob Arum, will decide Manny Pacquiao wants to come back for one last fight. But other than that, what can you really say about Terence Crawford? He's great. If he has a couple more wins against champions like an Ugas, or if he even moves up to 154 and faces, let's say, like a Brian Castano, I would have to say that Terence Crawford goes down in history with the same type of skill set, the same type of meanness, the same type of ability, whether or not it be boxer, whether or not it be puncher, that, we've seen in the Fab Four, because he possesses a little bit of each one of those guys.
Dax, I appreciate it. I look forward to next time, brother. Alex, final thoughts on Terence Crawford?
I think that he definitely made a very solid argument for himself in this perpetual argument for who's the best pound for pound in the sport. He was due for a fight, and I think that he did everything that we wanted to see him do. I think he makes a very solid case for himself as the best welterweight on earth. And one of the he's at least in that orbit of the top 3 or 4 guys on earth, best fighters on the planet, with Inoue, Usyk, Canelo, Crawford is right there. I do think that, like Dax said, I think the clock is ticking, and I hope that, I think because this sport is, like we've said, what have you done for me lately? And he has a real chance to make a strong case for himself in the next few months, because we know Canelo's next fight is sort of, less than spectacular. So if
we don't know.
well, I mean, he's fighting cruiserweight. It's a cherry pick fight, Bill.
Yeah, but it's still a cruiserweight. It's a
cruiserweight. But come on, he's not going to give him any challenge whatsoever. It'll be more challenge on the scale than it will on the in the ring. But I do think that if Crawford was to have a big fight in March or April, he has that ability to usurp the pound for pound discussion from Canelo, which, of course, that's what it's all about. When you're not the heavyweight champion of the world, that's what you kind of have to do. And these days, it's all about winning a little corner of the Twitterverse for a little while.
Alex, I appreciate your thoughts. I look forward to you next time, brother.
Billy C., my pleasure. Have a great night.
Take care. That's Alex Papali and Dax Khan giving you their final thoughts. My final thoughts. I've always said Terence Crawford was a quality fighter, and I honestly didn't like the way a lot of people say he didn't fight anybody. Oh, look at his resume, blah, blah, blah. The thing I can't forget about Terence Crawford is that when he first busted out on the scene, he was the opponent. He was the B-side. It was like that on TV on some of the bigger fight cards for the first couple of fights. I think the powers that be thought that he was going to lose, and he never did. All of a sudden, he becomes the A side. And I think that, he has proven that his skill set is there. He does measure an opponent, and then he does have a mean streak. He's a great finisher. He's got great hand speed. He's elusive more than it appears. I think tonight was a great example of that. I think that the fact that Shawn Porter, even though he is kind of a wild puncher in his own right, I think Terence Crawford proved that he's even more elusive and made it even more difficult for Porter to land anything substantial. He seemingly landed a couple of solid shots on Terence Crawford tonight, but nothing seemed to hurt Crawford. I didn't see him hurt once in this fight. I didn't even see him. I saw him stagger once, but I think it was a footing issue. I think he proved his accuracy and hand speed is the best in the division. I don't see Errol Spence beating Terence Crawford, and I certainly don't see Keith Thurman beating him. There's nobody left. Where does Crawford go? I think he takes a couple of more fights. We'll see what's offered to him. He'll make some paydays. I just from a business perspective, and Dax made several comments about the business of boxing, and he's 100% accurate. The thing I hope that doesn't happen is I hope that Crawford walks away on top and he's happy with his financial situation at that time or whatever. I would rather see him do that than fade away to continue to make the money. As he starts to fade, he's fighting some of the young guns like Dax and Alex were talking about earlier on the show, and he gets bigger paydays, but his skill set starts to fade, and then that's what people are going to remember. They're going to, see, we told you about Terence Crawford. I hope Terence Crawford gets a couple of more big fights and walks away. I do think he's made some decent money. I agree, and have said for a long time that Bob Arum is doing him no favors. But tonight was a pay-per-view on a pay-for channel or network. So, you're paying for the service of ESPN plus you got to pay for a pay-per-view on ESPN Plus tonight, which was a little strange, but it is what it is. All in all, Crawford proved that he is in the pound-for-pound discussion with a guy like Canelo Alvarez and, of course, Usyk. Those three have to be the top 3 pound-for-pound fighters right now. But anyway, it was an entertaining fight. And I wish the card was a little better. I wish all these pay-per-view cards were better, but it is what it is. Hey, we may be doing one more show to close out the year, maybe 2. The schedule gets a little light now that we're in the holiday season, but if we do, I'll see you then. If not, I want to wish everybody happy holidays and look for us to hit it hard for 2022. But keep scanning the website, BillyCBoxing.com. And check out this channel because we hope to do at least a couple of shows. We got some historical stuff going on, and we may do our end of year stuff. So we got at least 3 or 4 more to close out the year. Until then, I'll leave you with this. Ciao, baby.